The slap echoed like a gunshot. Corporal Derek Hollister's palm connected with the back of her head so hard that Petty Officer Third Class Elena Mercer stumbled forward, her tray crashing to the floor. Mashed potatoes splattered across government-issue linoleum. Green beans scattered like shrapnel. Coffee pooled dark and spreading beneath the fluorescent lights. "Wrong table, squid," Hollister's voice carried across the sudden silence. "Marines only." She was 22 years old, 5'4", 115 pounds soaking wet. Her Navy working uniform hung loose on her frame, and her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun that made her look even younger than she was. What Hollister didn't see was the thin silver chain tucked beneath her collar. What he didn't see was what hung from it. A Navy SEAL trident, one of fewer than 50 ever awarded to a woman in the history of the United States military. And he had just made the worst mistake of his life. The mess hall at Camp Pendleton held maybe 200 people at capacity. That Thursday afternoon in March of 2025, it held 163. Elena had counted them when she walked in. She always counted. 4 exits, 11 potential weapons within arm's reach, threats requiring immediate attention. 0, until Derek Hollister decided to change that math. She stood slowly, very slowly, the way a coiled spring unwinds before it snaps. There was mashed potato on her uniform, a smear of gravy on her sleeve, a cut on her lip where it had hit the table edge. She turned to face Hollister. Something in her eyes made him take a half step back. It was involuntary, instinctive, the way prey animals respond to predators they don't consciously recognize. He didn't even realize he'd done it, but his buddies noticed. Lance Corporal Brody Sullivan and Private First Class Keith Dawson flanked him like backup dancers, and both of them saw their leader flinch from a woman half his size. Elena didn't say a word, she just looked at him, through him, into him. Then she reached up and touched the thin silver chain at her throat, tucked it more securely beneath her collar, and walked out of the mess hall. No confrontation, no threats, no tears, just that look and the click of her boots on linoleum as 162 people watched her leave. Hollister's laugh broke the silence. Too loud, too forced. "That's right, Squid. Run back to your ship." Sullivan high-fived him. Dawson grinned. The mess hall slowly returned to its normal rhythm of conversation and silverware. But not everyone was laughing. Staff Sergeant Nathan Greer had been sitting 3 tables away, eating his lunch and pretending to read a training manual. Greer was 41 years old, a veteran of 3 combat deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, and he'd spent 18 months attached to a JSOC task force in Ramadi before rotating back to conventional forces. He knew operators when he saw them, the way they moved, the way they sat, the way they processed information, constantly scanning, constantly calculating, constantly ready. The Navy woman Hollister had just assaulted moved like an operator. She sat like an operator. And when she'd looked at Hollister, she'd looked at him like an operator deciding whether a target was worth the ammunition. Greer pulled out his phone and sent a text message to an old friend at Naval Special Warfare Command. "Need a favor, background check on a Petty Officer Third Class Elena Mercer, currently assigned in Camp Pendleton. Something doesn't add up." The response came back in 3 minutes. "That file's above your pay grade, Nate. Way above. Stop asking questions." Greer stared at his phone for a long moment. Then he looked at the door Elena had walked through, and he started asking more questions. Elena didn't go back to her barracks. She walked to the base gym instead, changed into PT gear, and started hitting the heavy bag. Left jab, right cross, left hook, right uppercut, each strike precise, controlled, devastating. She'd learned to box from her father when she was 8 years old. Master Chief William Mercer, SEAL Team 3, had believed that every child should know how to defend themselves. He'd taught her stance and footwork in their backyard in Montana, taught her how to slip punches and counterstrike, taught her that fighting wasn't about anger, it was about calculation. "Anger makes you stupid," he'd said, his weathered hands adjusting her guard. "Stay, it gets you killed. You want to survive? Think. Always think." He died thinking. A compound in Afghanistan, November 2019. His team had been ambushed during an extraction. He'd stayed behind to cover their withdrawal, took a bullet through the throat, bled out in the dirt while his teammates escaped with the high-value target. Elena had been 16, a junior in high school, planning to study nursing. The day after his funeral, she'd walked into a Navy recruiting office. "I want to be a SEAL," she'd said. The recruiter had laughed. "Ma'am, there's no such thing as a female SEAL." "Then I'll be the first." She wasn't the first, but she was among the first. The Navy's experimental gender integration assessment program had started in 2020. Elena had been selected in 2021. She'd completed BUD/S class 347 in 2022, one of 3 women to finish out of an initial class of 14 female candidates. The other 2 had dropped during Hell Week. Elena hadn't. Not when they'd held her underwater until her lungs screamed. Not when they'd made her run until her feet bled. Not when instructors had stood over her during surf torture, telling her she didn't belong, telling her to quit, telling her that women couldn't hack it. She'd finished, earned her trident, been assigned to SEAL Team 4. And then Yemen happened. Left jab, right cross, left hook. The heavy bag swung on its chains. Elena's knuckles were raw, her arms burned. But she kept hitting, because if she stopped hitting the bag, she might start hitting something else, or someone else. "You're going to break your hands." The voice came from behind her, male, commanding, old. Elena caught the bag and turned. Master Chief Samuel Brennan stood in the gym doorway. He was 58 years old, with silver hair, cut military short, and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and then weathered by decades of sun and sand and combat. 4 silver stars gleamed on the ribbon rack of his dress uniform, but he wasn't wearing dress uniform now. Just PT gear that did nothing to hide the mass of muscle and scar tissue that comprised his frame. They called him Iron for a reason, and Elena knew exactly who he was. "Master Chief Brennan," she said, coming to something approximating the attention. "At ease." He walked closer, studied her raw knuckles. "You punch like your father." Elena's breath caught. "You knew my father?" "Knew him?" Brennan almost smiled. "Almost. I fought beside him in Panama in '89. We were both young and stupid then. Thought we were invincible." The almost smile faded. "He saved my life twice before I could return the favor. I owed William Mercer everything." He looked at her, really looked. The way operators look at each other, cataloging threat potential and tactical capability and 100 other things that civilians never notice. "You've got his eyes," Brennan said quietly. "Same fire, same steel." "Why are you here, Master Chief?" "Because I've been watching you for 2 months, Petty Officer. Ever since you transferred to this base to push papers and pretend you're something you're not." His voice hardened. "Because I watched you get slapped in that mess hall and walk away when we both know you could have killed that Marine before he finished raising his hand." Elena's jaw tightened. "I made a promise. I know about your promise. I know about Yemen. I know about Garrett Webb and Donovan Pierce." The names hit her like physical blows. Petty Officer Garrett Webb, Chief Petty Officer Donovan Pierce, her teammates, her brothers, dead. "I know you held Garrett's guts together while he bled out," Brennan continued, his voice softening. "I know you held Donovan's hand while he died 30 seconds before the extraction bird arrived. I know you promised them that if you survived, you'd find another way. A way that didn't involve killing." Elena's eyes were burning. She refused to let the tears fall. "What I don't know," Brennan said, stepping closer, "is whether you think hiding in the shadows honors their sacrifice. Whether you think your father would be proud of you pushing papers and getting slapped by insecure corporals who couldn't carry your boots. That's not fair." "No, it's not. But William Mercer didn't raise his daughter to be fair. He raised her to be a warrior." Brennan's eyes locked onto hers. "The question is whether that warrior is still in there somewhere, or whether she died in Yemen with the men she couldn't save." Elena looked away, couldn't hold his gaze. "They didn't die because of me." "No, they died for you. There's a difference." Brennan reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Which brings me to why I'm here." He handed her the paper. "Joint Readiness Assessment, 3-day field evaluation. Marines and Navy personnel together. Physical endurance, tactical problem solving. Leadership under stress. Results go in permanent service records." Elena unfolded it, read it, looked up. Why are you showing me this? Because Corporal Hollister's squad is required to participate. And because I'm going to be one of the evaluators. Brennan's voice dropped low. This isn't about revenge, petty officer. This is about you deciding who you are, ghost or warrior, shadow or substance. He turned toward the door. Assessment starts Monday, 0600. I expect to see you there. And if I don't come, Brennan paused at the threshold, didn't turn around. Then you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what your father would have thought of the woman his daughter became. He was gone before she could respond. Elena didn't sleep that night. She lay on her rack in the nearly empty barracks, staring at water-stained ceiling tiles, running calculations she didn't want to run. If she participated in the assessment and performed to her actual capabilities, her cover would be blown. Questions would be asked. Her file would be pulled. People would know what she was. If she didn't participate, she'd be admitting defeat, letting Hollister win, proving that every insecure man who ever said women didn't belong in combat was right. And if she participated but deliberately underperformed, held back, pretended to struggle, she'd be betraying everything her father had taught her about honor. Never lie about what you are, William Mercer had said. Even when it's easier, even when it hurts, you stand up and you show them who you are, or you die a coward. He'd lived those words, died living them. Elena reached under her pillow and pulled out the chain she'd worn since Yemen. The trident hung heavy and cold against her palm, gold and silver and bronze, the eagle and anchor and flintlock pistol that marked her as one of the most elite warriors on the planet. Beside it, two dog tags clinked together. Webb, Garrett A. Pierce, Donovan K. She'd carried them for 14 months, every day, every night, a reminder of what she'd survived, what she'd lost, what she'd promised. I don't know what to do, she whispered to the darkness. I came here to stop, to be normal, to find peace. Whoa. The darkness didn't answer, but somewhere in her memory, Garrett Webb's voice did. Peace isn't the absence of fighting, Ghost. Peace is knowing what you're fighting for. She closed her eyes. Monday was coming. Sunday night, Colonel Diana Whitmore summoned Elena to her office. Whitmore was 54 years old, the first woman to hold command at Camp Pendleton, and she had the bearing of someone who'd spent 3 decades proving she belonged in rooms where people tried to keep her out. Silver eagles gleamed on her collar. Her gray hair was pulled back in a regulation bun. Her eyes were the color of gunmetal, taui, and twice as hard. Sit down, petty officer. Elena sat. Whitmore studied her for a long moment. Then she opened a folder on her desk. The cover was marked with classification stamps that made Elena's stomach tighten. I received your file this morning, Whitmore said. Your real file. The one that required 3 phone calls and a direct authorization from the CNO's office. Elena said nothing. 14 classified operations across 4 continents. Syria, Somalia, a location in Eastern Europe that's redacted so heavily I can't even determine which country it was. Whitmore looked up. 17 confirmed kills in defensive engagements. Navy Cross citation pending signature. Ma'am, I'm not finished. Whitmore's voice sharpened. Yemen, February 2024. The hostage extraction. Your team pulled 14 Americans out of a Houthi compound against 80-to-1 odds. You held that compound for 36 hours until extraction arrived. Elena's hands were shaking in her lap. She pressed them flat against her thighs. 2 of your teammates didn't make it out. Petty Officer Garrett Webb and Chief Petty Officer Donovan Pierce. Webb took a round covering your extraction. Pierce bled out from shrapnel wounds before the medevac could arrive. Ma'am, please stop. Whitmore stopped. The office was silent except for the tick of a clock on the wall and the distant sound of vehicles moving across the base. Why are you here, Petty Officer? Whitmore asked quietly. You could be anywhere, training with your team, running operations, doing the work you trained for. Instead, you requested transfer to training support at a Marine base in California. You took a desk job. You've spent 2 months pretending to be a paper pusher while Marines like Hollister treat you like a punching bag. She leaned forward. Why? Elena's jaw tightened. I made a promise. To whom? To them. Webb and Pierce. To my father. She swallowed hard. I promised that if I survived, I'd find another way. A way that didn't involve... She stopped. Killing people, Whitmore finished. Elena didn't answer. Didn't need to. Whitmore nodded slowly. I understand more than you know. She closed the folder. But I didn't call you here to discuss your past. I called you here to discuss your future. Ma'am, the Joint Readiness Assessment. Master Chief Brennan has already spoken to you about it. Yes, ma'am. He told you that Corporal Hollister's squad is required to participate. What he didn't tell you is that I'm the one who required it. Whitmore's eyes locked onto Elena's. And I'm specifically requesting that you participate as well. Not as an evaluator, as a competitor. Ma'am, with respect, if I compete in this assessment, people will figure out that I'm not a desk sailor. Good. Whitmore's smile was thin and sharp. Maybe it's time they learned. I came here to disappear, ma'am, not to... You came here to hide, petty officer. There's a difference. Whitmore's voice hardened. Hiding doesn't honor the men who died for you. Hiding doesn't honor your father. And hiding doesn't help the next generation of women who want to follow in your footsteps. Elena flinched like she'd been slapped. You have skills that 99% of military personnel will never possess, Whitmore continued. Skills earned through sacrifice, pain, and the deaths of people you loved. You can waste those skills pushing papers and getting slapped by insecure corporals. Or you can use them to show every person on this base what a real warrior looks like. She stood. Assessment starts Monday, 0600. I expect to see you there. She was gone before Elena could respond. Derek Hollister spent the weekend lifting weights and talking trash. You see the look on her face? He crowed to Sullivan and Dawson in the gym. Thought she was going to cry. Pathetic. You think she'll report it? Sullivan asked. No chance. Types like her never do. Too scared of making waves. Hollister loaded another plate onto the bench press. Besides, what's she going to say? Big mean Marine hurt my feelings? She'd be laughed off base. I heard Colonel Whitmore's making us do that field assessment, Dawson said. 3 days in the bush. Full combat load. Good, Hollister grinned. I'll crush it. Probably end up on the commandant's list for promotion. I heard the Navy squids are participating too. Hollister's grin widened. Even better. I'll crush her too. Show everyone what happens when you put females in warrior billets. He didn't notice Staff Sergeant Greer watching from across the gym. And he didn't notice the look of quiet satisfaction on Greer's face as he realized what was about to happen. The night before the assessment, Elena stood before the mirror in her barracks room, holding the trident and the dog tags in her open palm. Garrett Webb had been 26 when he died, a surfer from San Diego with sun-bleached hair and a laugh that could fill any room. He'd been the one who gave her the call sign Ghost because of how she could disappear into any environment and emerge exactly where the enemy least expected. You're not done yet, Ghost, he'd said as he bled out in that Yemen compound. Not by a long shot. Promise me. She'd promised. Donovan Pierce had been 34, a quiet man from rural Tennessee with a wife and 2 kids waiting back home. He'd been her mentor during her first deployment, teaching her all the things that BUD/S couldn't teach. How to stay human in inhuman situations. How to carry the weight of killing without letting it crush you. Pass it on, he'd whispered in those final seconds before the light left his eyes. Everything I taught you, pass it on. She promised that too, and her father, William Mercer, the man who taught her to fight, to think, to never back down from a challenge no matter how impossible it seemed. Warriors don't just win battles, he'd told her once, cleaning his rifle in the living room while she did homework at the kitchen table. Warriors create the next generation of warriors. That's the real legacy. Not what you take, what you give. Elena closed her fist around the metal. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, she whispered, but I'm done hiding. One way or another, tomorrow everything changes. She tucked the chain beneath her shirt, felt the weight settle against her chest, and went to bed. She didn't sleep, but she was ready. Elena arrived at the assessment staging area at 0545 Monday morning. 40 participants had volunteered, 38 Marines, 2 Navy personnel, Elena and a hospital corpsman named Rodriguez, who looked about 12 years old and had clearly never seen anything more strenuous than a morning jog. Hollister was already there, stretching with Sullivan and Dawson. He saw Elena and smirked. Well, well, Squid decided to play with the big boys. Elena didn't respond. She was too busy cataloging the terrain, the equipment, the evaluators setting up their clipboards. 3 days, 72 hours, physical and tactical assessments that would push everyone to their breaking point. She'd done this before. In Yemen, she'd done 72 hours defending a compound against overwhelming forces with no extraction coming and no hope of survival. This was nothing, but it was also everything, because this time, she wasn't fighting to survive. She was fighting to remember who she was. Colonel Whitmore appeared at exactly 0600. Behind her stood Master Chief Brennan and a man Elena recognized immediately. Master Gunnery Sergeant Roy Callahan, 52 years old, 3 silver stars. One of the most decorated close-quarters combat instructors in the Marine Corps. He'd trained raiders and special operations personnel for 20 years. He'd also trained with SEAL teams during joint exercises, which meant he knew exactly what to look for. Whitmore explained the assessment rules. 3 phases: physical endurance, tactical problem solving, combat casualty care under stress. Results would be recorded, performance would be evaluated, and at the end, those who excelled would be recommended for advanced training opportunities. This isn't a competition, Whitmore said. This is a revelation. By the end of these 3 days, you'll know exactly what you're made of, and so will everyone else. Her eyes found Elena in the crowd, held them for exactly 2 seconds. Then she turned and walked away. Callahan stepped forward. First evolution begins in 10 minutes. 15-mile tactical movement with full combat load. Simulated casualty scenarios throughout. Anyone who falls out gets documented. Anyone who quits goes home. His eyes swept across the group. Any questions? Silence. Then gear up. Clock starts at 0630. Elena pulled on her pack. 65 pounds of equipment, water, and simulated ammunition. Standard load. She'd carried heavier in Yemen, carried wounded teammates on top of it. Hollister shouldered his own pack, grunting slightly at the weight. Hope you can keep up, Squid, he said as he passed. Elena didn't answer. She just started walking, and she didn't stop. By mile 8, 12 participants had dropped out. Hollister was still moving, but his form had deteriorated. Shoulders hunched, steps shortened, breathing ragged and uncontrolled. The gym muscles that looked so impressive under fluorescent lights were turning against him, demanding oxygen his cardiovascular system couldn't provide. Elena hadn't altered her pace once. She moved with the machine-like efficiency her father had drilled into her. 1 foot in front of the other. Breathe in for 4 steps. Out for 4 steps. Ignore the pain. Ignore the fatigue. Ignore everything except the next checkpoint. Mile 10 brought the first simulated casualty scenario. A mannequin rigged with fake blood lay across the trail. Evaluators with clipboards watched from the trees. Most participants stopped, assessed the casualty, attempted basic treatment. Hollister knelt beside it, breathing hard, and tried to apply a tourniquet. His hands were shaking. He fumbled the windlass, dropped it in the dirt. Time, Callahan called Sergeant. Casualty bled out. Move to secondary care position. Hollister's face twisted with frustration. Elena approached the second mannequin 30 meters ahead. This one had multiple wounds. Simulated gunshot to the chest. Shrapnel injuries to the legs. She knelt, assessed, prioritized. Chest seal first. Prevent tension pneumothorax. Then tourniquets on the arterial bleeds. Then secondary wounds. Her hands moved with surgical precision. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Time, Callahan called. Casualty stabilized. Excellent triage protocol. He made a note on his clipboard. 3 minutes and 41 seconds. A new course record. Not that anyone announced it, but Brennan noticed. And when his eyes met Elena's across the trail, there was something in them that might have been pride. Mile 12, mile 14, mile 15. When they crossed the finish line, only 19 of the original 40 were still standing. Hollister was one of them. Barely. His face was gray. His legs were trembling. He looked like a man who'd just survived a car wreck. Elena looked like she could run another 15 miles without breaking a sweat. Callahan walked over to her, studied her with the careful attention of a man who'd spent his life identifying talent. Petty Officer Mercer, Master Guns. That's a hell of a pace you kept. Just putting one foot in front of the other, Master Guns. He studied her for a long moment. His eyes dropped to her left forearm where faded scars crossed her knuckles. Those from training? Some of them. And the others? Elena held his gaze. From places that don't have names on maps. Callahan nodded slowly. Get some water. Phase 2 starts in 2 hours. He walked away, but Elena could feel his attention on her for the rest of the day. Whatever she'd been hiding was starting to show through the cracks. That night, around the assessment camp's small fire, the survivors compared notes. 15 miles with that load, Sullivan groaned. My feet look like ground beef. Shut up, Hollister snapped. You made it. That's what matters. Did you see the squid? Dawson asked quietly. She barely broke a sweat. Desk sailors do cardio, Hollister said dismissively. Doesn't mean anything. Wait until the tactical evolution. That's where real Marines separate from pretenders. Elena sat 20 meters away eating an MRE in silence. She could hear every word they said, just like she could hear the conversation happening on the other side of camp, where Staff Sergeant Greer was talking quietly to Brennan. File confirmed, Greer said. You're right. She's the real deal. One of the first women to complete BUD/S, earned her Trident at 20, deployed to Yemen with Team 4. And now she's here doing training support work. Requested transfer after Yemen. Word is she's got survivor's guilt like a truck. The 2 operators who died were covering her extraction. Silence. Does Whitmore know? Whitmore's the one who pulled the file. She's the one who put Mercer in this assessment. Why? Because that Marine corporal has been harassing her for weeks, and because Whitmore wants to make a point. Hell of a point. Hell of a point. Elena finished her MRE, packed away her trash, and lay back on her sleeping bag, staring up at the stars. Tomorrow was tactical day. Tomorrow everything would change. She didn't sleep that night either. Not because of discomfort. She'd slept in worse conditions. Crawl spaces in Syria, drainage pipes in Somalia, bombed out buildings in places that didn't officially exist. She didn't sleep because every time she closed her eyes, she saw Garrett Webb's face, heard his voice, felt his blood on her hands as she tried to hold his insides together while the compound burned around them. You're not done yet, Ghost. She opened her eyes, stared at the stars. I know, she whispered. I know. Sometime around 0300, Elena heard movement near her position. Footsteps. Quiet, but not quiet enough. Someone who'd learned to move silently but hadn't mastered it. She didn't move, didn't react. Just tracked the sound through closed eyes, mapping the intruder's position by the subtle crunch of dirt and grass. The footsteps stopped near her pack. Careful rustling. Someone going through her gear. Hollister, looking for something. Evidence of who she really was. Ammunition for his campaign of harassment. He wouldn't find anything. The Trident and dog tags never left her neck. Everything else was generic Navy issue. After 2 minutes, the rustling stopped. Footsteps retreated. Elena waited until the sound faded completely. Then she opened her eyes and saw Brennan standing in the shadows 20 meters away, watching Hollister's retreating form. He turned his head, met her eyes in the darkness, said nothing. But the message was clear. He knew what Hollister had done, and he was keeping track. Dawn came cold and gray, and Elena was already awake when the first light touched the camp. She'd been awake for hours, actually, running through the tactical scenarios she expected they'd face today. Building clearance, hostage rescue, ambush response, counter-ambush, the standard curriculum for any advanced combat training. She knew all of it, had done all of it, for real. You awake, Squid? Hollister's voice cut through the pre-dawn silence. He was standing 10 feet away, stretching his shoulders, watching her with that predatory focus she'd cataloged the first day she'd seen him. I'm awake. Good. He stepped closer. Because today's the tactical evolution. Real warrior stuff. Not the jogging we did yesterday. Elena said nothing, just continued packing her gear. You know what I think? Hollister crouched down to her level. I think yesterday was a fluke. I think you trained for that specific test. Cardio queens can do that. But tactics? Decision-making under pressure? That's where real operators separate from pretenders. You might be right. Her agreement caught him off guard. He'd expected resistance, defiance, something he could use to justify his contempt. I might be what? Right. Elena zipped her pack closed. Guess we'll find out. She stood and walked toward the assembly point, leaving Hollister crouched in the dirt with his mouth half open. Callahan called the remaining 19 participants to formation at 0600. His voice was raw from a night of too little sleep and too much coffee, but his eyes were sharp as scalpels. Today's evolution is tactical problem solving. You'll be divided into two teams. Each team will be given a building clearance scenario with limited intelligence and hostile role players. Your job is to plan, execute, and adapt. Evaluators will document everything. Performance today counts triple what you did yesterday. Sullivan raised his hand. Who picks the teams, Master Guns? I do. Callahan consulted his clipboard. Team 1. Corporal Hollister is team leader. Sullivan, Dawson, Rodriguez, Patterson, and Kowalski. Hollister straightened visibly. Team leader. This was his chance to prove himself. Team 2. Petty Officer Mercer as team leader. The words hit the assembly like a mortar round. Hollister's head snapped toward Callahan. Master Guns, with respect, she's Navy. She shouldn't be leading Marines in a tactical exercise. With respect, Corporal, I didn't ask for your opinion. Callahan's voice could have frozen jet fuel. Petty Officer Mercer's personnel file indicates instructor-level qualifications in small unit tactics from a previous joint training assignments. She's qualified. You're not in a position to question my decisions. But did I stutter, Corporal? Hollister's jaw clenched. No, Master Guns. Then shut your mouth and listen. Callahan finished reading the team assignments. Elena got Greer, Sergeant Williams, and 4 Lance Corporals whose names she'd memorized the day before but who'd barely spoken to her since the assessment began. Greer caught her eye as he joined her team, gave her a small nod that said, I know what you are, and I'm here to help. Elena nodded back. Game on. The first scenario was straightforward. A 2-story structure with 6 rooms, 3 hostile role players, 1 hostage. Standard stuff. The kind of problem they taught at every combat training center in the country. Hollister's team went first. They approached like they were filming an action movie. Hollister kicked in the front door without checking the windows. Sullivan and Dawson flooded in behind him, weapons sweeping wildly. Patterson tripped over the door threshold and accidentally discharged his blank-loaded rifle into the ceiling. Contact front, Hollister screamed, firing at the first role player he saw. It was the hostage. Cease fire, Callahan's voice boomed through the building. Cease fire. Hostage is dead. Team 1 has failed the scenario. Hollister's face went purple. That's not fair. The hostage wasn't where the intelligence said. Intelligence is never perfect in the real world, Corporal. That's why we have something called positive identification before we shoot. Callahan made a note on his clipboard. Team 1, scenario failed, 1 friendly casualty, mission compromised. Hollister looked like he wanted to punch someone. His eyes found Elena standing with her team outside the building, and the rage in them was pure and hot and dangerous. Team 2, Callahan called. You're up. Same building, different configuration, different role player positions. You have 5 minutes to plan. Elena gathered her team in a tight circle. Okay, she said quietly, here's what we're going to do. She pulled a stick from the ground and drew the building layout in the dirt. Marked entry points, marked angles of fire, marked dead zones where hostages might be held. Standard 4-man stack on the primary entrance. Greer, your point. Williams, you're 2, I'm 3. Patterson, your rear security. The rest of you hold the perimeter and watch the windows. What about hostile identification, Greer asked. We clear each room systematically. No one shoots until we have positive ID on hostile intent. Weapon raised, aggressive posture, direct threat to the team. Anything less, we challenge verbally first. And the hostage? Hostages are usually held in interior rooms. Limited exits, easy to control. We work outside in, Clear the perimeter rooms first, then move to the center. Williams, a sergeant with 10 years of service, raised an eyebrow. You've done this before. Once or twice. Greer almost smiled. Any questions? Elena asked. Silence. Then stack up. What happened next took 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Elena's team moved through the building like water through pipes. Smooth, silent, coordinated. Each room was cleared with textbook precision. Slice the pie, check the corners, communicate with hand signals, move to the next objective. They found the first role player in room 2. He was holding a weapon. Drop it, Greer commanded. The role player complied, secured without a shot fired. Second role player in room 4. Same result. Third role player was in the back bedroom with the hostage. He had a simulated knife to the hostage's throat. Most teams would have hesitated, waited for negotiation, called for backup. Elena didn't hesitate. She stepped into the doorway, weapon raised, and said one word. Release, bish. The role player, a Marine Staff Sergeant named Powell, who'd played bad guys in 100 training exercises, looked into her eyes and saw something that made his grip on the knife falter. Not fear, not aggression, certainty. The kind of certainty that came from having done this in real life, from having actually pulled triggers, from having actually saved hostages, from having actually killed men who needed killing. Powell released the hostage. Building clear, Greer shouted. Callahan checked his stopwatch, checked his clipboard, checked again. Team 2, scenario complete, 0 casualties, all hostiles neutralized, hostage secured. He looked up at Elena. 3 minutes and 41 seconds. That's the fastest cleared time I've seen in 15 years of running this exercise. Hollister stood at the building entrance watching. His face was unreadable, but his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. Elena walked past him without a word. She didn't need words. The results spoke for themselves. The second tactical scenario was more complex. A 3-building compound with multiple entry points, overlapping fields of fire, and limited intelligence suggesting hostiles in unknown positions. Hollister demanded a chance to redeem his team. Callahan allowed it. This time, Hollister actually tried to plan, drew diagrams, assigned positions, briefed his team on contingencies. But planning and execution were different things. When the scenario started, Hollister's team moved well for the first 30 seconds. Then Dawson took a wrong turn and walked directly into a role player's line of fire. Simulated casualty. Then Sullivan panicked and abandoned his position to help Dawson, leaving Hollister's flank exposed. Another simulated casualty. Hollister tried to adapt, tried to adjust. But he was thinking like someone who'd learned tactics from manuals, not from experience. He was thinking like someone who'd never actually been shot at. Scenario failed, Callahan announced. 2 friendly casualties. Mission compromised. Hollister's team limped out of the compound, looking like they'd just survived a car wreck. Elena's team went next. Same compound, same variables, same pressure. This time, Elena changed the approach entirely. We're not going in the front, she said during the planning phase. Why not, Patterson asked. Because that's what they expect. Front entrances are kill zones. Anyone defending this compound will have their heaviest coverage on the obvious approaches. She drew a new diagram in the dirt. Greer, you take Williams and Patterson through the service entrance on the east side. Low and quiet. I'll take the rest through the roof access on building 2. The roof? Rodriguez, the young corpsman, looked nervous. Is that even possible? It's a maintenance hatch, standard on these training structures. Most people forget it's there. Elena met his eyes. Trust me. Rodriguez swallowed, nodded. The scenario started. Greer's element moved through the east entrance like ghosts, silent, professional. They cleared the first building in 2 minutes flat. Elena's element went through the roof. She'd been right about the maintenance hatch. It opened directly into a utility corridor that bypassed the main defensive positions entirely. Her team moved through the building's interior, neutralizing hostiles from angles they never expected. When the 2 elements linked up in the central courtyard, they'd cleared the entire compound without a single simulated casualty. Callahan stared at his stopwatch. 3 minutes and 41 seconds. New course record. He looked at Brennan, standing at the edge of the assessment area. Brennan said nothing, but there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Something like vindication. That afternoon, Callahan threw a curveball. Second scenario reset, he announced. Same compound, new hostiles positions, intelligence updated. It was a test. Elena knew it immediately. Callahan wanted to see if she could adapt on the fly or if her first success was a fluke. She could adapt, but something was different this time. As her team stacked on their entry point, Elena noticed that the role players weren't where the intelligence said they'd be. The positions had been changed at the last minute. Someone was testing her limits. She held up a fist. Team halt. Wait, she whispered. She scanned the compound, analyzed the sightlines, processed the new information in 3 seconds flat. Change of plan. They've shifted positions. Entry point, Charlie is now hot. We go in through Delta instead. The team adjusted. The scenario proceeded. They cleared the compound again, adapting to every change Callahan threw at them. 3 minutes and 41 seconds. Again. Callahan stared at her for a long moment after the scenario ended. You're not a cryptologic technician, he said quietly. No, Master Guns, I'm not. What are you? Elena didn't answer, but she didn't need to. Callahan had trained with enough SEALs to recognize the signs. He turned to Brennan. You knew. I knew. And you didn't tell me. You didn't need to know, until now. Callahan nodded slowly, looked at Elena again. What happens tomorrow? Tomorrow, Brennan said, is the combat casualty care evolution, and then the hand-to-hand assessment. And her opponent, Brennan's eyes found Hollister, standing across the compound, staring at Elena with an expression that mixed confusion and rage and something that might have been the beginning of fear. I think we both know who her opponent will be. That night, Elena sat alone at the edge of camp, staring at the stars. The assessment had 2 evolutions left: combat casualty care under stress and the hand-to-hand combat evaluation. She'd done casualty care under actual combat conditions, treated actual wounds under actual fire, watched men die because help came 30 seconds too late. The hand-to-hand evaluation was different. She'd spent her entire career learning how to incapacitate, disable, and kill. The techniques came as naturally to her as breathing, but she'd also spent 14 months trying to convince herself that she didn't need those skills anymore, that she could be someone else, someone normal, someone who didn't know 17 different ways to kill a man with her bare hands. You're thinking too hard. Brennan's voice came from behind her. She hadn't heard him approach, which meant he'd wanted her to hear him, and she'd been too distracted to notice. Sloppy. Master Chief, at ease. He sat down beside her, staring at the same stars. You're wondering whether you should hold back tomorrow. I'm wondering a lot of things. Let me make it simple for you. Brennan's voice was quiet but steel hard. Your father and I served together for 15 years. We bled together, killed together, saved each other's lives more times than I can count. And in all those years, I never once saw him hold back. My father never made the promises I made. No, he made different ones. Brennan turned to look at her. He promised me the night before he died that if anything ever happened to him, I'd look after you. I'd make sure his daughter became the warrior he knew she could be. Elena's breath caught. He called me from that compound in Afghanistan. Did you know that? Satellite phone, 30 seconds before they overran his position. He said, Iron, I'm not making it out of this one. Look after Elena. Don't let her waste what she is. I didn't know. Now you do. Brennan stood. Tomorrow you're going to face Hollister in that hand-to-hand assessment, and you're going to have to decide whether you're the woman your father believed in or the shadow you've been pretending to be for 14 months. He started to walk away. Master Chief? He stopped. What would you do in my position? Brennan was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned his head, just enough for her to see his profile against the stars. I'd show them who I am, and I'd let the consequences fall where they may. He walked away, leaving Elena alone with the stars and the weight of her decision. Day 3 started with the evolution everyone had been dreading. Combat casualty care under stress. Multiple simulated casualties. Limited supplies, active hostile fire, using blank ammunition and pyrotechnics designed to create confusion and panic. This was where most people broke. Elena had done this for real, had treated actual wounds under actual fire, had watched men die because help came 30 seconds too late. She wasn't going to let that happen here, not even in simulation. The scenario started with an explosion, a pyrotechnic charge designed to disorient. Then blank ammunition began cracking from 3 directions. Then the screaming started. Casualties. Multiple casualties. Most participants froze. Some panicked. Some forgot everything they'd ever learned about tactical combat casualty care. Hollister was kneeling beside a mannequin with simulated arterial bleeding, his hands shaking so badly he couldn't grip the tourniquet. "Come on," he muttered. "Come on. Come on." "You're doing it wrong." Elena appeared beside him, calm, focused, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade through smoke. "The tourniquet goes 2 inches above the wound, not on it. You're trying to occlude the artery feeding the injury, not the injury itself." "I know that." "Then do it." Hollister's hands kept shaking. He dropped the tourniquet, cursed, picked it up, dropped it again. Elena reached past him and took the tourniquet from his hands. "Watch." She applied it in 3 seconds. Perfect placement. Perfect tension. The simulated bleeding stopped. "Now, the chest seal." She pointed to another mannequin nearby. "That one has a penetrating chest wound. Do you know the procedure?" Yes, I think." "Don't think. No, walk me through it." Hollister's brain scrambled for the training he'd received months ago. Identify the wound, clean the area, apply the seal during exhalation. During exhalation, why? Because, because you want to prevent air from entering the chest cavity. If you apply during inhalation, you trap air inside, which can cause tension pneumothorax, which will kill your casualty faster than the original wound. "Good," Elena nodded. "Now go apply it. I'll handle the other casualties." She was gone before he could respond. For the next 12 minutes, Elena moved through the scenario like a surgeon in an emergency room, triaging casualties, directing treatment, correcting errors before they became fatal. She saved every single mannequin. When the scenario ended, Callahan gathered the participants for a debrief. "That was the most chaotic TCCC exercise I've seen in 5 years," he said. "Half of you forgot basic protocols. A quarter of you froze completely. And a few of you," his eyes found Elena, "performed like you've done this under actual combat conditions." Hollister stood at the back of the group, staring at the ground. He'd watched Elena work, watched her move, watched her hands, steady, precise, unhesitating, do things that his hands couldn't do. And for the first time since the assessment began, he started to wonder if maybe he'd been wrong about her. The afternoon brought the final evolution, hand-to-hand combat assessment. Callahan read the rules while the remaining 19 participants gathered around the assessment mat. Standard combatives, strikes, grappling, submissions, match ends on tap-out, knockout, or evaluator stoppage. No eye gouges, no groin strikes, no strikes to the throat. He looked up from his clipboard. Match assignments: Patterson versus Williams, Sullivan versus Dawson, Rodriguez versus Kowalski. He paused. Hollister versus Mercer. The air changed. Every eye in the clearing turned to Elena, then to Hollister, then back again. Hollister smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a man who'd finally found a way to salvage his pride. "Finally," he said, "finally we get to see what the little squid is really made of." Elena said nothing. She just walked to the edge of the mat and started rolling her shoulders, loosening her joints, preparing her body for what was about to happen. She'd removed her blouse and wore only her brown undershirt. The dog tags were tucked inside, the thin silver chain barely visible against her collarbone. Hollister was already on the mat, bouncing on his toes like a boxer before a title fight. He'd stripped down to his undershirt too, and his arms were thick with veins, pumped from 3 days of physical exertion and a lifetime of weights. He had 6 inches on her, nearly 100 pounds, and he looked down at Elena like a wolf sizing up a rabbit. "Last chance to tap out, squid," he said quietly. "No shame in admitting you're outmatched." Elena looked up at him. Her eyes were calm, empty, the eyes of someone who'd faced far worse than a Marine corporal with an ego problem. "Begin," Callahan called. Hollister lunged. He was fast for his size. Elena gave him that. His right hand came in hard. a haymaker designed to end the fight before it started. The kind of punch that worked in bar brawls and gym showdowns against people who didn't know how to move. Elena wasn't one of those people. She slipped left, letting his fist sail past her ear by less than an inch. Her hand came up, not to strike but to guide. She redirected his momentum, used his own force against him. Suddenly, Hollister was stumbling past her, off balance, exposed. She could have ended it there, could have applied any of a dozen techniques that would have put him on the ground with a joint lock or a choke. Instead, she stepped back, reset, waited. Hollister spun around, face flushed with embarrassment and rage. Lucky, he spat. He came again, this time smarter. A jab-cross combination followed by a level change for a takedown attempt. Textbook Marine Corps combatives. Elena sprawled on the takedown. Her hips dropped low, her hands pushed down on Hollister's shoulders. He couldn't complete the shot. She spun out of his grip and created distance again. Still didn't counterattack. Fight back, Hollister shouted. Stop running. I'm not running. Then hit me. Elena tilted her head slightly. Why? The question seemed to short-circuit something in Hollister's brain. He'd expected resistance, expected aggression, expected a fight he could win through superior strength and weight. What he got was a woman who moved like water and refused to engage on his terms. Because that's what this is, he said through gritted teeth. A fight. Or are you too scared? I'm not scared of you, Corporal. Then prove it. Elena's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You don't want me to prove it. Yeah, I do. No. Her voice dropped. You really don't. Hollister charged. This time he committed everything. Full speed. Full power. Arms wide for a body lock that would take her to the ground and let his weight do the work. It was the move of a man who'd stopped thinking and started reacting. Elena didn't run. She stepped into his charge. What happened next took less than 2 seconds, but everyone watching would remember it for the rest of their lives. Elena's hands found Hollister's wrist and elbow. She pivoted, dropped her center of gravity, used his momentum to execute a textbook hip throw that sent 220 pounds of Marine corporals sailing through the air like a rag doll. Hollister hit the mat hard. The impact drove the air from his lungs. Before he could recover, Elena was on him. Her legs wrapped around his torso, her arms snaked around his neck. A rear naked choke, perfectly applied, perfectly controlled. Hollister thrashed, bucked, tried to pry her arms away. Her grip didn't budge. Tap, Elena said quietly, her mouth close to his ear. It's over. Just tap. Go to hell, Hollister gasped. He kept fighting. His face went red, then purple. His movements became sluggish, uncoordinated. Tap, Elena repeated. I don't want to put you to sleep, but I will. I'm not tapping to a... He couldn't finish the sentence. His hand came up, slapped the mat twice. Elena released immediately, rolled away, stood up in one fluid motion. Hollister lay on the mat, gasping for air, staring at the sky with an expression that mixed shock and humiliation and something else. Something that might have been the beginning of understanding. Callahan checked his stopwatch. Match, submission, time 47 seconds. The crowd was silent. Greer let out a low whistle. 47 seconds, someone muttered. That's impossible. Hollister's got 100 pounds on her. How did she... She's not what she seems, Brennan said quietly. None of us knew, but we're about to find out. Elena walked to the edge of the mat. She wasn't breathing hard, wasn't sweating, wasn't showing any sign that she'd just submitted a man nearly twice her weight in less than a minute. She reached for her canteen. That was when Hollister attacked. He came up from the mat like something possessed. No warning, no announcement. Just pure, unfiltered rage propelling 220 pounds of humiliated Marine toward the woman who'd embarrassed him in front of everyone. Elena, someone shouted. She turned. Too late. Hollister's shoulder hit her in the midsection like a battering ram. The impact drove her backward off the mat, onto the hard-packed dirt. Her canteen went flying. Her body hit the ground with a sound that made everyone wince. Hollister was on top of her instantly, pinning her down with his weight, his hands going for her throat. Think you're better than me? He screamed. Think you can just... Elena's training kicked in. Not the restrained, controlled techniques she'd used on the mat. Something older. something she'd learned in places where hesitation meant death. Her palms shot upward, catching Hollister under the chin. His head snapped back. Before he could recover, her hips bucked violently, creating space. Her legs wrapped around his arm. She twisted. Hollister screamed. She had him in an armbar, the kind of armbar that separated shoulders from sockets if you didn't tap immediately. "Stop!" Callahan shouted, running toward them. "Both of you, stop!" Elena didn't stop. She couldn't. Her body was operating on autopilot now. Years of combat training overriding conscious thought. She torqued the armbar harder. Hollister screamed again, and then the chain snapped. The thin silver chain she'd worn since Yemen, the one that held her trident and the dog tags of her fallen teammates. It broke under the violence of the struggle. The chain slid off her neck. The contents spilled onto the dirt. A Navy SEAL trident badge landed 3 inches from Hollister's face, gold and silver glinting in the afternoon sun. The eagle, the anchor, the trident, the flintlock pistol. 2 dog tags landed beside it, metal clinking against metal. Webb, Garrett A. Pierce, Donovan K. Time stopped. Hollister stared at the trident. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "That's not..." Elena released the armbar, rolled away, grabbed the chain, the badge, the dog tags. But it was too late. Everyone had seen. "Holy Mother of God," Sullivan whispered. Greer stepped forward slowly, his eyes fixed on what Elena was clutching to her chest. "Petty Officer Mercer, is that what I think it is?" Elena didn't answer her. Her hands were shaking. The first sign of weakness she had shown in 3 days. She was trying to refasten the chain, but her fingers wouldn't cooperate. "Answer the question, Petty Officer." Callahan's voice was quiet, controlled. But there was something underneath it, something like awe. "Is that a trident?" "Yes." The single word fell like a bomb. "That's impossible," Hollister said. He was still on the ground, cradling his arm, but his eyes were locked on Elena. "Women can't be SEALs. It's not allowed. There's no such thing as a female." "There is now." Brennan stepped forward from the crowd. His voice carried across the clearing like a command. "The integration program started in 2020. First female candidates graduated BUD/S in 2022. 3 of them. I was one of them," Elena said quietly. She'd given up on the chain and was holding the trident in her closed fist. 3 women finished. I was one of them. The silence that followed was absolute. Callahan broke it first. "What team?" 4. "Deployment?" Elena hesitated, looked at the dog tags in her other hand. "Yemen, February 2024. Callahan's face changed. "The hostage extraction, 14 Americans from the Houthi compound." "Yes." "Christ." Callahan ran a hand through his hair. "That was your team." "That was my team." Elena's voice was flat, distant, like she was reciting facts about someone else's life. "We held for 36 hours until extraction could reach us. We lost 2 operators, Petty Officer Garrett Webb and Chief Petty Officer Donovan Pierce." She held up the dog tags. "I carry them every day, so I don't forget what they died for." Hollister had managed to sit up. He was staring at Elena like he'd never seen her before, like everything he thought he knew had been torn apart and rearranged into something unrecognizable. "You're a SEAL," he said, "an actual SEAL, and in the mess hall, I hit a SEAL. You hit a woman eating lunch." Elena's voice was hard, cold. "You didn't know what I was. You just knew I was smaller than you, female, alone. You thought that made me a target." "I didn't know." "That's the point, Corporal." Elena stepped closer to him. "You didn't know. You didn't care. You saw someone you thought was weak, and you decided to prove how strong you were by hurting them." She crouched down to his level. "That's not strength. That's cowardice." Hollister flinched like she'd hit him. "I could have killed you in that mess hall," Elena continued. "Could have ended you before you even understood what was happening. Do you know why I didn't?" He shook his head. "Because I made a promise." She looked at the dog tags again. "To them, to my father, to myself. I promised that if I survived, I'd find another way. A way that didn't involve hurting people unless lives depended on it." "Your father?" "Master Chief William Mercer, SEAL Team 3. He died in Afghanistan when I was 16, covering his team's extraction. Elena's jaw tightened. He taught me that the only respect worth having is the kind you earn when no one's watching. I spent 3 days watching you, Corporal. I know exactly what kind of respect you've earned. The words hit Hollister harder than any punch. He looked away. Couldn't meet her eyes. The crowd had grown. Word had spread through the camp faster than wildfire. Marines and sailors who'd been resting in their tents were now gathered around the clearing, staring at the small Navy woman holding a trident badge like it was the most natural thing in the world. Colonel Whitmore pushed through the crowd. She'd clearly been summoned from the command post. Her uniform was slightly disheveled, her hair escaping its regulation bun, but her eyes were sharp as she took in the scene. Hollister on the ground, Elena standing over him, the trident visible in her hand. Well, Whitmore said quietly, I suppose the secret's out. You knew? Sullivan asked. Ma'am, you knew what she was? I knew. Whitmore moved to stand beside Elena. I've known since she arrived. Her file, her real file, requires special clearance to access. I accessed it 3 weeks ago when I started hearing reports about certain Marines harassing a Navy petty officer. Her eyes found Hollister. I decided that instead of simply punishing the behavior, I'd create an opportunity for everyone to learn something. Including you, Corporal. Learn what? Hollister's voice was hoarse, broken. That strength isn't about size or volume or intimidation. It's about what you do when you have power over someone else. Whitmore looked at Elena. Petty Officer Mercer had the power to destroy you multiple times. In the mess hall, on the combat mat, just now when you attacked her from behind. Each time she chose restraint. Why? Hollister asked. He was looking at Elena now, really looking. Why would you let me do all those things to you when you could have stopped me? Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she crouched down so she was at eye level with him. Because I've been where you are, Corporal. Not the same situation, but the same feeling. Desperate to prove yourself. Terrified that you're not good enough. Building your identity on being the strongest, the toughest, the most dangerous person in the room. She paused. And then you meet someone who shows you that everything you thought you knew was wrong. What did you do when that happened to you? I got better, Elena stood. That's the only choice that matters. When someone shows you that you're not what you thought you were, you can either get bitter or get better. The bitter ones never grow. The better ones become the warriors they always wanted to be. She extended her hand to Hollister. He stared at it for a long moment. Then slowly he took it. Elena pulled him to his feet. I'm sorry, he said. The words came out rough, like they'd been scraped from somewhere deep. For the mess hall, for all of it, I'm sorry. I know. I didn't understand. I know that too. I want to be better. Hollister's voice cracked. I don't know how, but I want to try. Elena nodded. That's a start. Brennan stepped forward then, positioning himself where everyone could see him. His voice carried across the clearing like a command. All of you listen up, he said. I'm going to tell you something that William Mercer, her father, my brother in arms since Panama in '89, told me 30 years ago when I was also a young fool who thought muscle was the same thing as strength. He paused, made sure everyone was listening. Real strength isn't about who you can beat. It's about who you can protect, who you can build, who you can turn into a warrior after you're gone. He pointed at Elena. This woman has killed 17 people in combat operations. Yemen, Syria, places you're not clear to know about. She could have added one more to that list today, and no one would have blamed her. But she chose not to. That's restraint. That's discipline. That's strength. Hollister stood with his head bowed, absorbing every word. You want to be better? Brennan continued, looking directly at him. Then remember this moment. Remember what real strength looks like, and spend the rest of your career trying to live up to it. A week later, Colonel Whitmore summoned Elena to her office. Admiral Catherine Monroe was waiting. She was 62 years old, with silver hair cut military short and the bearing of someone who'd spent 4 decades breaking barriers in a world that didn't want her. She'd been one of the first female Navy pilots, had commanded ships, had risen to flag rank through a combination of talent, determination, and sheer refusal to quit. Now she commanded all SEAL operations, Every operator, every team, every mission. Petty Officer Mercer, Monroe said. Sit down. Elena sat. I'm going to be direct with you. I need you. Not want, need. Ma'am, the female integration program is at a critical juncture. We have 3 women who've passed BUD/S, but retention is a problem. They're struggling with integration into teams that weren't designed for them, and 2 of them are considering leaving the community entirely. I didn't know that, ma'am. No, you've been too busy hiding to know. There was no judgment in Monroe's voice, just fact. I understand why you ran. Yemen broke something in you, but running doesn't fix what's broken. It just delays the pain. What would you need me to do? Run the Female Integration Training Detachment. Prepare candidates for selection. Mentor operators who've already passed. Build a support structure that helps women succeed in a community that's still learning how to include them. I'm 22 years old. I don't have the rank or the experience. You have 17 kills and a Navy Cross citation sitting in a classified file. You have survival records that make veteran operators shake their heads in disbelief. And you have something no one else has. Monroe leaned forward. You're the first woman to actually do this job successfully. Not train for it. Do it. In actual combat, under actual fire, against actual enemies. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Brennan, standing in the corner of the office, spoke. What do you think Garrett and Donovan would want? You to disappear? Or you to make sure everything they taught you doesn't die with them? Elena touched the dog tags under her shirt, felt the familiar weight of the trident against her chest. My father told me once that warriors don't just win battles. They create the next generation of warriors. That's the real legacy. Not what you take, what you give. He was a wise man, Monroe said, and he raised a remarkable daughter. Elena took a breath. Yes, ma'am, I'll do it. Monroe smiled. Good. The first class arrives in 3 weeks. 30 female candidates from all branches. Most of them have never experienced anything close to what you've been through. I'll be ready. I know you will. 3 months later, Elena stood at the front of Training Base 7 at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. 30 women sat before her. They ranged in age from 19 to 28. Navy, Marine Corps, Army, Air Force. Every branch represented, every background imaginable. Some had college degrees. Some had barely finished high school. Some came from military families. Some were the first in their families to ever serve. But they all had one thing in common. They wanted to be what Elena was. My name is Petty Officer First Class Elena Mercer, she said. Her voice carried easily across the bay. Not loud, but clear. Commanding. Some of you may have seen video footage of me from a few weeks ago. Some of you may have read articles or heard rumors. So let me tell you what's true and what isn't. She paused. Let them wait. I am a Navy SEAL, one of the first women to complete BUD/S and earn the Trident. I have deployed to combat zones on 4 continents. I have killed 17 people in defensive engagements. I have watched teammates die in my arms. I have been wounded, captured, and left for dead in places that don't appear on any map. 30 pairs of eyes stared at her with a mixture of awe and fear. That's what's true. Now, here's what isn't. Elena stepped closer to them. I am not special. I am not superhuman. I am not blessed with some genetic gift that makes me better than you. Everything I've accomplished, I accomplished through training, discipline, and refusing to quit when everything inside me screamed to give up. She looked at them, each of them, making eye contact one by one. Most of you will not complete this program. Statistics say 90% of you will quit or be eliminated before the first phase ends. That's not because you're women. That's because special operations selection is designed to break people. It breaks men at the same rate. She paused. The question isn't whether you'll be broken. The question is what you'll do when it happens. She reached under her shirt and pulled out the trident, held it up so everyone could see. This is what you're fighting for. This piece of metal, it weighs about 2 ounces. It's worth nothing at any pawn shop, but it represents something that can't be bought or inherited or faked. She lowered the trident, let it hang against her chest. It represents the willingness to suffer more than you thought possible for people you may never meet. It represents becoming part of something bigger than yourself. She tucked it back under her shirt. Your training begins tomorrow at 0400. Be here or don't. The choice is yours. She turned to walk out. A voice stopped her. Ma'am? Elena turned, a young woman in the front row, 24 years old, strong build, fierce eyes. Her name tag read Cartwright. Yes? The men who died, your teammates, Webb and Pierce. Cartwright's voice was steady. Do you think about them? Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she reached under her shirt again and pulled out the dog tags, held them up. Every day. Does it get easier? No. Elena's voice was soft. It just gets different. At first you think about how they died. Then you start thinking about how they lived. And eventually you realize that thinking about them isn't pain. It's purpose, Witrin. She tucked the dog tags away. They died so I could survive. The least I can do is make that survival mean something. Cartwright nodded slowly. Thank you, ma'am. Get some rest. You're going to need it. Elena walked out of the training bay into the California sunshine. Brennan was waiting by the door. He'd been watching the entire session from the back of the room. Your father would be proud, he said. You think so? I know so. Brennan fell into step beside her as she walked toward the administrative building. William always said the measure of a warrior wasn't how many enemies they killed. It was how many warriors they created. I remember. You're creating warriors now. That's what he would have wanted. Elena stopped, turned to face the old Master Chief. Thank you, she said, for everything, for coming to find me, for pushing me, for not letting me hide. Brennan shrugged. I made a promise to your father. I keep my promises. So do I. Elena touched the dog tags through her shirt. I promised Garrett and Donovan that I'd find another way. I think I finally have. What way is that? Building instead of destroying, teaching instead of fighting, creating warriors who will be better than I am. Brennan smiled. It was a rare expression on his weathered face. That's the way, petty officer. That's always been the way. That night, Elena sat alone in her quarters writing a letter. She'd received word that morning. Derek Hollister had completed Marine Raider assessment and selection. He'd been one of only 12 candidates to finish out of an initial class of 120. His first act after graduation had been to write to Elena, a 3-page letter, handwritten, detailing everything he'd learned about himself during those brutal weeks. Everything he'd changed, everything he'd become. Now Elena was writing back. Sergeant Hollister, she wrote, congratulations on your achievement. Raider selection has a 90% attrition rate. The fact that you finished says something important about who you've become. She paused, thought about what else to say. You asked me once how to be better. I told you it was a choice you had to make every day. It sounds like you've been making that choice. Keep making it. The world needs warriors who understand that strength isn't about dominance. It's about protection, service, sacrifice. She signed the letter, sealed it, set it aside for mailing tomorrow. Then she picked up the trident and the dog tags, held them in her palm, felt their weight, their history, their meaning. I did it, she whispered. I found another way. Garrett Webb's voice echoed in her memory. You're not done yet, Ghost. Not by a long shot. I know, she said. I'm just getting started. The next morning at 0400, 30 women stood in formation outside Training Base 7. Elena walked to the front of the formation. The California sky was still dark, stars still visible. The Pacific Ocean whispered in the distance. Yesterday, I told you what you're fighting for, Elena said. Today, I'm going to show you how to fight. She looked at them, each of them, 30 women who'd chosen to be here, who'd chosen to traum. This program will break you. That's not a threat. It's a promise. You will be broken. Physically, mentally, emotionally. The only question is whether you'll put yourself back together and keep going. She pointed at the beach. First evolution starts now, 5-mile run on sand. Full gear. Anyone who falls out gets documented. Anyone who quits goes home. She started running. Behind her, 30 women followed. Some of them would make it. Most wouldn't. But every single one of them would be changed by the experience. Would leave this place knowing more about themselves than they'd known before. That was the legacy. Not the kills, not the missions, not the trident. The warrior she created, the lives she shaped, the future she built. Elena ran into the dawn, the dog tags bouncing against her chest with every stride, the trident warm against her skin. Garrett and Donovan were with her. Her father was with her. Every warrior who'd ever taught her anything was with her, and she was passing it all on. "I'm not running anymore," she whispered to the wind. "I'm not hiding anymore. I'm building." The sun rose over the Pacific, and Elena Mercer, ghost, seal, warrior, teacher, ran toward it, building the next generation, one step at a time.